Let's expand our conversation into the conduct of former President Trump. Joining me now in my panel, Angela Rye, attorney and political strategist, and the host of On One with Angela Rye, and Brett Stevens, columnist for the New York Times. Let me go to you first, Angela. And Angela was one of our frequent guests early when I started the show, going back a few years, and glad to have you with us tonight. But let me ask you as an attorney, but also as a woman of color. Many Americans were deeply disturbed by the racial undertones in the Trump team's defense of their client during this impeachment trial. Democrats of color were featured prominently in their videos and were depicted as hostile and threatening. Vice President Kamala Harris' name was invoked and mispronounced repeatedly, even though she had nothing to do with the events of January 6th. How can Republicans now call for unity after condoning this kind of overt bigotry in a historic proceeding watched by millions in this country and, for that matter, around the world?
Well, Brad, first let me say it is always good to be home, and I, of course, feel that way with you. So thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be with you. I wish we were talking about something different, though. In this circumstance, what we have here is, an age-old playbook where Black people in their Black skin are deemed inherently violent and criminal in the mere image of us. Whether we are behaving peacefully or not, protesting just for the right to breathe or not, we are deemed violent. And what is so unfortunate is that 5 people gone, with 5 people dead after the Capitol Hill insurrection, which again I continue to call a terrorist attack, that wasn't enough. And I think what's most troubling is the fact that that in and of itself was not condemned by the Republican Party, that in and of itself also needs to be condemned by the Democratic Party, by the white folks in the Democratic Party. Too often we make racism, white supremacy, white toxicity, white identity extremists a partisan issue, but it's not. It's a foundational issue in this country. So really what we need to be doing is examining why could they get away with some of that? How much longer will the Vice President of the United States be disrespected in that way? Her name, as you said, invoked and inerrantly so. How much longer will that continue? And who are the folks who will stand with us to say this is not acceptable? This is indeed part of the problem. The fact that Donald Trump was able to traffic in birtherism before he was ever even considering running for president is part of the problem. It was cute to them for too long, and we have been screaming for months, for years, it's dangerous, and now they see just how dangerous it was.
Yeah. Birtherism was his political entree for, in many ways. Brett, in the state of Georgia, where at least 2 investigations are underway in the wake of November's election, including the infamous phone call in which Trump demanded the Georgia Secretary of State find enough votes to overturn the election result in that state. Now, this was the state in which Black voters most clearly swung the needle in Joe Biden's direction. What is the significance of Trump's campaign zeroing in on overturning Georgia's results so specifically and so obsessively it would not have altered the Electoral College that much?
Well, I was publicly calling for Trump's impeachment before January 6th, precisely because his call to the Secretary of State, Mr. Raffensperger there, struck me as a clearly impeachable offense. And you're absolutely right. There was an element, a large element, I think Angela was absolutely right in this, of race baiting there because the Black vote was so decisive in swinging Georgia. We all know that he would have needed Wisconsin and Arizona too to even get to parity with Joe Biden. So it was without question part of a race baiting and mob baiting strategy that swiftly led to what happened on January 6th. And I hope, Reverend, that those investigations, along with the investigation now in New York, move forward.
Angela, in addition to the obvious investigation into the potential criminal conduct of Donald Trump, we could be looking at additional inquiries into an alleged call made by Senator Lindsey Graham the removal of the Northern Georgia District Attorney and Rudy Giuliani's false claims before the Georgia legislative committees. Could we expect to see the accountability we didn't get in the U.S. Senate come from the state of Georgia?
Well, that would be poetic justice, and let me tell you why. Black people certainly helped to seal the deal for Joe Biden and helped to seal the deal for a historic Senate runoff, right? So it would be poetic justice for this Black woman who is the lead prosecutor leading this investigation right now to say not only did Black people turn out in this election and we're going to protect their right to vote, as you just talked about in the last segment with Mondier Jones, around what is the CBC doing, the Congressional Black Caucus doing. There is a Voting Rights Act with bearing John Lewis's name, the poetic justice of everything he fought and really lived all of his life for, which is to ensure the protection of Black votes. For that woman to be in the position to make this call is tremendous. And I think absolutely, where there's a Black woman in charge and she's going to be responsible for the investigation and fact-finding, and she's already well on her way, there's a better chance that we will have equal justice under the law with her at the helm.
Now, the district attorney of Fulton County, Fannie Willis, is who you're referring to, who's in charge of the investigation, joined my colleague Rachel Maddow on Thursdays. Here's what she had to say about the scope of the investigation. I want your reaction
What
to
I
that.
know about investigations is they're kind of like peeling back an onion. And as you go through each layer, you learn different things. To be a responsible prosecutor, you must look at all of those things in investigation. To be fair to everyone involved, this is a very important matter, as you've already highlighted. And so, yes, the investigation seems that it will go past just this one phone call that we've discussed.
Now, Brett, what kinds of layers do you expect to be uncovered in the course of this investigation?
Well, what I've been looking at more closely are the investigations in the state of New York by the district attorney for the Southern District, Cy Vance, looking into possibilities of fraud in terms of the financing of some of Trump's signature buildings like 40 Wall Street or the Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue. And of course, the Attorney General of the state of New York, Tish James, looking at falsifying valuations. And I think those are investigations that really need to carry forward, because remember, the career of Donald Trump didn't begin in January of 2017 and it didn't end in January of 2021. There is a long record there, and I think it's past time that we look at all of those things. The one area where I agree with Mitch McConnell is that what happened yesterday with his acquittal should not be the end of Mr. Trump's legal jeopardy. If anything, it should only be the beginning.
Well, Angela, go ahead, Angela.
Rev, I was just going to say really quickly, it is so interesting to hear Mitch McConnell want somebody else to be responsible for what he should have done with his Senate Republican counterparts. There's no reason why he should now be punting to these folks. Of course, there are other investigations. Donald Trump is a criminal, a stone cold criminal at that. And the investigation in Georgia is around the solicitation to commit election fraud. How interesting is it that the Republican Party has been screaming forever? Rev, you know this firsthand about election fraud, about voters that are not living, casting ballots. Donald Trump alleged 5,000 voters who were dead voted in Georgia, and it was 2 people. 2. So this is the thing. It's like the reason why the Voting Rights Act, as you talked about earlier, has been decimated. The reason why they haven't passed voter protections under the Voting Rights Act with John Lewis's name is because they're alleging election fraud. But they would know because they do it.
And it's interesting when we mention Mitch McConnell, Angela, and Brett, is he talked about how that he had to vote acquit because he was a former president. It was Mitch McConnell that when the impeachment happened while he was president, Mitch McConnell sent the Senate on until after the inauguration. That's like somebody commits a crime. You or I help them get out of the jurisdiction, and then we come back and say, you can't deal with that crime because the guy's out of the jurisdiction. You drove the car, Mitch McConnell, Angela Rye,
No,
Brent Stevens, thank you both for being
that's
with us.
true.
And